am I in this relationship just because it's convenient, or am I in this relationship because it's adding value to me and I'm adding value to it? You don't want to only be taking value from a relationship or only giving a relationship. It needs to be giving and receiving. I often say that leadership is hard, and it's hard because you need to be able to adapt to different people in different situations. I've also talked about the fact that leadership is hard because the hardest person to lead is yourself. We can tell other people to do certain things and we actually not follow through on those things. AI is great, and I will always use AI and different things to make life easier. But I think now more than ever, a lot of times we ask AI or Google different things and we seek out things that resonate with what we already believe or we already think. We don't look for and accept things that challenge our beliefs. And I've said this on podcasts before, and I should probably say it more, is that we need to be more comfortable with challenging our beliefs.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Faronbi, aka IncrediPaul, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where I talk to incredible people doing incredible things so we can become the most incredible versions of ourselves. First off, thank you so much for listening to this episode. But I want you to know you can also watch this episode on YouTube. Regardless if you're listening or watching this episode, really appreciate your support. If you like free things, you want to stick around to the end of this episode, I am continuing to give you opportunity to grab free merch by a key phrase I'm going to share. If you don't want to wait to the end of this episode or you just want to pick up some free merch, you can go to the website. You can also learn more about the Be Incredible Starter Pack, which includes a resume, budget template, interview guide, and leadership masterclass, all for free. Go to IncrediPaul.org to learn about that. So after that quick commercial, I want to share what I'll be talking about today, which is a part 2 to resilience. So maybe really part 3. So I shared something about resilience to kick off February. I had a solo episode talking about that. And then last week, Russell was on sharing about the importance of resilience in leadership. And I want to do a part 2 for what I was talking about. I want to talk about resilience in relationships, because this is all about becoming the most incredible versions of ourselves. And yes, I focus on leadership and personal growth, but I think relationships is a key part of personal growth and really understanding how to do that. So let's just dive in. I feel like I've been coming across more and more people recently who have either ended relationships or had relationships end on them, and really understanding how to navigate things new in this whole world of dating and things like that. And this episode is not going to be specifically about dating. Maybe I'll get there. I don't think I will, but it is more focused on how do you come back from having either ended a relationship or maybe a relationship ended on you, and navigating the loss of that relationship. Because a lot of times, if it's maybe 4, 5, 6, 10-year relationship, that really becomes a part of you. And there's a sense of losing yourself in a relationship that's pretty common. So it takes some time to understand what it means to be resilient in relationships. So with that, share a story from my life. I've shared a little bit about it on the podcast, but I'll go a little bit deeper. And I'm only sharing this for some context, because I'm very much a private person, but I'm realizing more as I share some of the deeper things with friends and people I come across. It's an opportunity to connect and also realize that I don't have everything all together all the time. I think it's really easy. I do the podcast, I do speaking, I help with coaching, I do a lot of different things. And it's easy to think, oh, Paul has everything together and nothing bad ever happens to Paul. That is far from the truth. A lot of things happen to me, but I'm able to stay positive, stay resilient. And I will share one of those things a little bit in more detail as an opportunity to learn from it. And hopefully it is helpful for you all. So key thing for me is I live in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, if you will. And I have lived here 2 years now, which is crazy to think about. And the transition to Nashville or transition to any city is always a little bit can be rocky at the beginning. For me, it was rockier than it probably should have been. So I moved here for a new career, working with Mars as an R&D engineer. All at the time when I moved, I was actually still married. So I haven't talked about it too much on the show, but was married, not married. I just say I'm single, but technically divorced, but I am single, and just navigating that in the last 2 years. So what ended up happening was I moved first to Nashville. Plan was for me to find a place for me and my then wife to try and figure out where we're going to live and all those things. And we did actually settle on a place where we wanted to live 2 months after moving here. And the day that we finalized close on a house, sat me down and said that she did not want to be with me anymore, that she wanted to be separated to think about the relationship. And to say that I was shook would be an understatement. And I can say it calmly now, but I would say like I was honestly too stunned to speak. Didn't really know. I was in shock. It was not something I was expecting. And to make matters worse, I was actually about to give a leadership webinar, which she knew about it. She didn't want to wait to talk about it until after, but she dropped that. Within an hour, I had to give a leadership webinar, and she actually ended up just leaving shortly after telling me, and we didn't really get to talk things through until like later in the week. And it was a snowball effect. But all that to say, I had a leadership webinar, and I still to this day do not know how I got through it. I was able to get through it. It was like an hour webinar. And I just remember after it, I just bawled, cried. I'm not a very emotionally expressive person when it comes to negative emotions. People always tell me I'm always happy, which I'm not always happy. No one's always happy. I show happy. I smile. I have negative emotions like everyone else, but they don't usually last for very long. So that was a very emotionally distressing situation that happened. I went back and forth for a few months after that happened. Meanwhile, no one really knew what was going on. So I was still putting out the podcast. I had a new job at the time. Like I said, I just started with Mars. This was just really just a couple months in when this happened. No one really knew. I was still doing speaking. So like I had that webinar. I think I had a trip up to Michigan later that week as well. And then my birthday was like the following week. So like there's a lot of things going on during this time. And no one really knew what was happening for the first month. And I will say that I've always been a huge supporter of coaching and self-development, even therapy, but I had not been as exposed to much therapy up at this point. I thought, and I was like, okay, I'll just save it for another time. I think it could be helpful, but I'll do it some other time. But with this specific situation, navigating the separation in a new job, new environment, person of faith, so like trying to find a new church family, all those things, it was a lot. I knew I needed help to get through this. So I was able to find a therapist that I trusted. I ended up seeing them for about a year and just understanding more about myself and how to navigate things in this relationship. And honestly, there's things about myself that I just didn't know, especially how I dealt with intimate relationships. So it's a little bit deeper for me. And I think it's why more and more, either in LinkedIn posts or talking with people, even on the podcast, I talk specifically about boundaries. Make sure you're prioritizing yourself and make sure you know what your boundaries are and holding to them. And that was something I didn't do very well. I stood on the podcast before and I'm a recovering people pleaser, and it showed up the worst in intimate relationships and sometimes with family. So I would put myself in really bad situations just to make sure the other person was good. And oftentimes I didn't even think about the stuff that I wanted or needed at times. And so that were some of the things that I found out. And the whole context of everything that was going on was pretty crazy because we had conversations about if she wanted to move to Nashville or not. And actually, I had another offer from a company that was in St. Louis that would have paid me more. I forfeited that because we had talked and said that this was going to be a good opportunity for the both of us start a new life, a new city, because after we had gotten married, she had kind of moved to where I was living at the time. So it kind of felt like she was just an addition to my life. This was something that we could start brand new. So all of these conversations were had. So it wasn't something that I made the move or accepted the job without having those conversations and asking really profusely. I'm sure it got annoying to the point because I just felt like something was off. And then finally, it got to the point where she said everything was good and I trusted her. And then a few months later, this happened. So you can only imagine how emotionally distressing it is when you feel like something's off and someone's telling you that everything's fine, and then you finally believe them and it's fine, and then a couple of months later, everything just explodes and it's not actually fine. So that was something that I had to deal with, and therapy was the way to go. I've said so much about how Black people and Black men, especially, we don't talk enough about therapy or the things we have to deal with. I think anyone who has a relationship, long-term relationship, I'll say maybe 2, 3 years, especially if you're married to them, I think it's very critical that you understand and you take the time to heal for that relationship. So this is a little bit a sidebar from what I had planned to talk about, but I remember something that my therapist told me is that ideally, like, you don't enter any relationships as far as like committed relationships, like intimate relationships, until you give yourself about a year to just heal from it. Yeah, yeah, you can still have friendships, you can hang out with people, but you need to take the time to heal from it. And I thought, that a year seems like a long time. Like, I don't know if I can necessarily do that. But then I mean, I definitely met some people like in that year time frame. I didn't end up pursuing anything because I'm someone that is super consistent and I want to trust the expert. That was something that I learned the most about myself is I want to make sure that I feel whole and everything feels good. And I wanted to be able to trust what the therapist was telling me and with prayer and all those things. Key thing to know is that in any relationship, it is a two-way street. And if you are the only person that is making strides to better your relationship or communicating your relationship, it's going to be a losing battle. And I know it can be tougher for some people, a lot of people, like if you have kids involved, multiple kids involved, you know, a lot of financial things involved to be able to step away from all those things. I would say because I live in a glass half full type of world. Luckily, we don't have any kids. As far as financially, I was good by myself. Honestly, I was providing most of everything anyway. But it was just really, it was painful in the sense because I'm a very empathetic person, and I could tell that this was not good for her. And I stayed in the relationship because I thought, and this is going way off track. I don't know if I even will keep this in, but one thing I learned about myself is I had this view of a relationship, especially as a man in a relationship, is one that you sacrifice everything. I've heard the term happy wife, happy life. And there are even most of the times I told her that if she was happy, I was happy. I didn't really think about what I wanted or what I needed. I was constantly giving, whether it's to her, to her stuff I was doing for the nonprofit, IncrediPaul. There are a few different times where I just needed to rest or not do anything. And then sometimes that was a point of contention because I just wanted to take a break and not do things. But it was something that I had to deal with myself and understand that okay, this relationship is ending. You need to figure out a way to prioritize yourself and learn what you need and what you want in a relationship. So regardless, here I was. I knew I had to work through things because the relationship was gone. She made her decision. We went through the divorce process. And I talk about resilience a lot. And I think we think that resilience is a solo game, and it can be a solo game. It can be something that you do on your own. I think it does take a decision from you, but it doesn't mean that you can't lean on and reach out to people for support. I would caution who you take advice from, who you take support from. It's very easy for things to become an echo chamber. AI is great, and I will always use AI and different things to make life easier. But I think now more than ever, a lot of times we ask AI or Google different things, and we seek out things that resonate with what we already believe or we already think. We don't look for and accept things that challenge our beliefs. And I've said this on podcasts before, and I should probably say it more, is that we need to be more comfortable with challenging our beliefs, making sure that our beliefs are not something that it's beliefs are a belief because, like I said, I'm a person of faith and I believe in God, but I've also challenged that belief multiple times and I've come back to it, and there's different explanations for the world and different things. But I think it's very critical that we don't slip into just believing things or doing things just because we've always done them. Because we're not, if you always do the same things, you're always going to get the same results and you're never going to actually get better. And if you're living a life that you don't like, you need to change things and do things in a different way. And that's literally what personal growth is. Making sure you're seeking out things from people and make sure it's not an echo chamber. If you learn anything from this podcast, you know this is not a podcast where for people who just want to keep the status quo, keep doing what they're doing. I will always encourage you that you can do it, but also challenge you that you can do better. I'm not going to sit there and say that, hey, everything's going to be fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to change anything. Life is going to be easy. Leadership is easy. Everything's going to go smoothly. That is not what this podcast is about. I often say that leadership is hard, and it's hard because you need to be able to adapt to different people in different situations. I've also talked about the fact that leadership is hard because the hardest person to lead is yourself. We can tell other people to do certain things and we actually not follow through on those things. And it's really critical as a leader that you are the leader that you would want to follow. If you are doing and saying things that you would not recommend to other people, why are you doing or saying that? But really key is make sure in relationships that you have clear boundaries. So being resilient is really understanding that yes, life is going to happen. We don't always expect it. I didn't expect my relationship, my marriage to end, especially the way it did with some of the lies and deception that were there. And I think it taught me some things just to be aware of and not to compromise on things that I need just to make someone else happy. So maybe that's something that someone needs to hear. I'm not saying that if you're married or you're in a relationship just to get rid of it. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying to have the difficult conversation, ask the questions and understand, am I in this relationship just because it's convenient, or am I in this relationship because it's adding value to me and I'm adding value to it? You don't want to only be taking value from a relationship or only giving a relationship. It needs to be giving and receiving. And a key thing I've also learned, it's also interesting, is that a lot of times we as men will not do or say anything if we'll just exist and let things go, even if they're not going very well. Key thing is to make sure that you have boundaries and don't assume that your boundaries are something that people will know. That's something I've talked to friends because for whatever reason, now people come to me people came to me for relationship advice, but it's coming more and more. The thing is, do not assume that people know your boundaries. Don't assume that people know what you're thinking, because that's what I've seen the most being navigating life single now, is that people get upset and they get angry about assumptions and boundaries that they never told anyone. And you cannot have someone know what you're thinking or read your mind. That is not human. That's not healthy either, to have someone just read your mind. Like sometimes that happens as you get to know a person, but we are humans. We're supposed to communicate whether things are good or things are bad. When you communicate things are bad, that does not mean that someone is mad at you or does not think well of you. It just is a data point that they want to address and to move forward. I think as someone that is all about personal growth and becoming the most incredible version of myself and inspire you all to do the same thing, is when you see things that are not what you expect or not what you want, that's an opportunity to have a conversation, to communicate. That's an aspect of maturity. If you're not seeing those things, or maybe you are the person that when things are going wrong, you don't want to talk about it. You just kind of assume everything is all for naught and you move on. I would say ask yourself, why is it that you feel that way? Have you talked to a close friend? Have you talked to a therapist? And I know therapy is not the cheapest thing in the world, but I've also said on the show before, a lot of companies, if you're a W-2 earner, have a third party and they might have free therapy that you may be able to access. I would say figure it out. Better you talk to your HR rep or look through your benefits and see, because you might be able to get free therapy. And I think everyone should go to therapy at least once, because life is hard and there's certain things that we do and we just think are normal. We don't realize it has come from the way we have interacted with people in the past, and things can actually be better than we think. I was able to get through the divorce, understand more things about my goals and relationships right now, and really being patient when it comes to intimate relationships. I streamed a podcast probably a year and a half ago now that talked about the difference between companionship and intimate relationship. And a lot of people want companionship, but they really don't know how to put that into words, and they're seeking the intimate relationship in order to get there. And I think it is important and it is nice to have a partner, have those intimate relationships, but you can have companions as well. And your partner is not going to be everything for you. There is no one that can be everything for you in that sense. And even if they are everything for you, it's probably not healthy. What I realized is I really needed companionship, because with so many different avenues and the way my mind works, I'm involved in so many different things. Maybe there is someone out there that can reach me on multiple levels, but a lot of times it's really just one or two dimensions and it seems more surface level. I don't get to go as deep in things. So I oftentimes go to things by myself, and a lot of times people are shocked by that. But the thing for me is I would rather go and do things by myself than go and do it with someone just for the sake of having someone to show up with. This is a longer episode, longer than I thought it was going to be. And I hope the details I shared are somewhat helpful. I mentioned therapy, I mentioned good friends and reaching out to people, but ultimately the thing that got me through it all as a person of faith is my relationship in Jesus. When this happened, ran to the feet of Jesus and realized that I could not do this on my own. It was very heavy. I just put it in context because I am someone that travels a decent amount for work. And I really, if it took me a while to settle, because like I mentioned, I had just closed on the house, had to move all the stuff into the house, had to still work my full-time job. I still was in podcasts, which I probably, maybe in hindsight, I could have stopped doing. But the thing is with the podcast and a lot of the content I'm doing is I'm not doing it for myself. And I realize I'm doing it because of it's my purpose and my calling. And it's rewarding to do. So there were days and times where it was harder than others to fill for the podcast, to interview people from the podcast. I think I had some deep conversations with people. And I realize now that relationships really matter. And I have so many great friends that have always been there, that have always been supportive, that I didn't give an opportunity to support me. And when I did open up, they were there with open arms and they were so supportive. And maybe this is something that someone needs to hear. And maybe you don't have supportive friends. Maybe there's opportunities. It might be therapy, maybe a coach. I don't know what it is, but find someone. But I think a lot of times we're in this individualistic society that we want to do things on our own. AI is prevalent and we want to figure things out. But we as humans, we live in community. We need community. We need each other. And I think if we don't rely on each other when things are hard or be able to share when things are good, we lose the humanity of things. I think sometimes when tough times happen, you have people that run to Jesus, or you have people that run away from Jesus. People that run away from Jesus, I don't often understand. I know life is hard, but the thing is, with Christianity and really being a Christ follower, Jesus never said that life was going to be easy. Did not say that. On the flip side, he said life was going to be hard. In this life, you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Because Jesus never said that life was going to be easy. He said he would be with us. He said that he would never leave us nor forsake us. And I think it's really easy to look at the world and say the things because Lord knows how crazy things are out there. And I just have to I keep my faith in Jesus because that's the only thing I can do at this point. Obviously, I'm gonna do what I need to do, whether it's voting or using my voice for different things. But at the end of the day, my faith in Jesus is what leads me to continue to do the things that I do, empowering Gen Z professionals in STEM to be incredible. But maybe you're not a person of faith and you kind of skip past all of that. Maybe all that stuff makes sense. My goal is to be a light in a dark world. If you have any questions, please reach out about what it really means to follow Jesus, because I know a lot of people say they follow Jesus, but their actions don't model it. And I think that's why it's so important for me to show and say that I follow Jesus and I'm going to walk the ways of Jesus as well. I'm not just gonna say I'm a light. I'm going to be the light in the dark world. It was a different episode. Really was focused on resilience to get through all of those things, whether it's with therapy, with friends, so much prayer. And I can honestly say, like, even from last year, it's been 2 years in Nashville, and that this happened like a year and a half ago with all the stuff with the divorce being finalized, that honestly I feel better. I have more consistent joy than I've ever had. Obviously, I have down moments. I have moments that I things aren't great, whether it has to do with thinking about all the stuff that happened in that transition, or even like navigating new relationships that it's just like I don't know what's going on, just learning what it means to date again, all these different things. But one thing I know is life has been better than it has ever been. There's been challenges, like I've shared the relationship side. There's been other challenges because that's just life. I am thankful that God has been able to keep me through it. So I almost forgot. Use this keyword, subscribe to the newsletter, and then you'll be able to be entered to win free merch. Oh, back while I was in middle school, actually before then, I played baseball through high school. And while I started in middle school, played in high school. And in middle school, I actually broke my nose playing baseball. So I was in the batting cages, didn't have what they call an L screen. So it's the screen that if someone hits the ball back to you, it doesn't hit you, it keeps you safe. So I was in a manual batting, in a batting cage, and I was pitching to someone. I had a game like the next day. Ball came back to me, hit me in the nose, ended up in the emergency room, was there to like 3, 4 in the morning after getting there. I think like at 7:30 p.m. It was a whole thing. But the key word today is nose. So I broke my nose in middle school playing baseball. And keep watching the show. And there's one more opportunity to get some free merch. And then you're just going to have to buy it after that. Thank you all for sticking with me through this episode. Definitely longer than I wanted it to be. Hopefully it was helpful. I'm sure I ended up taking some stuff out that I didn't think was as relevant, but hopefully you still got the core meaning behind it. But hopefully you got something out of it. Just make sure you're intentional with your resilience, whether that's in your career, your relationships, or your leadership. Seek out resources to help, and you too can be incredible.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible. Incredible.